Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time. The Access Live event is currently in music hold and will start momentarily. If you would like to ask a question during the event, press star 3 on your telephone keypad at any time.
Good evening. My name is Armando Gracia, and I will be the moderator for tonight's telephone town hall. We're so glad you could join us. Before I give the floor to the congressman, I want to give some announcements. If you have a question for the congressman, you can press star 3, repeat star 3 on your phone keypad at any time, and you will be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff that will take down your name and question. The next time you hear your name, you will be on live on the call, and you'll be able to ask your question directly. Another thing, you can sign up for our e-newsletter at *6. Repeat, *6. And a little reminder real quick, though. This is an official office event, and we kindly ask that you keep tonight's topics to issues pertaining to Congress, the district, and our nation as a whole. I will now give the floor to the Congressman for his opening remarks, and then we'll move on to questions and answers. Congressman, the floor is yours.
Armani, thank you, and thank you to the team that put the phone call together, and for all of the constituents who have joined the call. We deeply appreciate it. Now, there are a lot of things I could talk about right now. Front and center, obviously, for the people of this district, which I'm proud to represent, is what we've been going through as a community, not just in Kerrville, but broadly throughout the Hill Country with what happened with the floods in July. To start with, before anything else, just know that myself, my family, my team, so many people in Washington, my colleagues, have been praying for the people affected, praying for all the families. It's been an overwhelming outpouring of support from the people that I work with, and we've been overwhelmed with the gratitude of the people from the district with all that has been pouring in. I'm going to get into that in a little bit more in a minute, but I just think it's important to say that has been front and center for everything. This is going to be a little different teletown hall because of that than it would normally be from a legislative update perspective, but I am going to give you some legislative update because it's so critically important. So I want to start with a couple of those things, and then I want to close with the flood because to me that's the most important. On the legislation front, it's really obviously a big deal that in July, on July 3rd, we remember that well because it's the day before the floods, that we were able to deliver on the president's big, beautiful bill. Now, that bill was what we call a reconciliation package, which means that it's something that we can get through the Congress, through the House, through the Senate, and majority vote. That bill had a number of pieces to it and components to it. I won't go through all of them. But importantly, we used our position on the Rules Committee and our position on the Budget Committee to have a significant impact on shaping that legislation. Our goal from the very beginning was to balance the tax reductions that we wanted to achieve for families, for small businesses, for family farmers, and for all of the people in Texas that were reliant on lower tax rates to have less of a burden. We wanted to marry that with spending reductions to try to get to the place where we believed that with economic growth and those policies, we could get to deficit neutrality or better. That was the governing structure from the very beginning. Now, there was a lot of noise throughout the whole process. Let me summarize it. We fought to make that bill better. Some people on this call aren't going to love it from the right flank. Some aren't going to love it from the left flank. I will tell you that this bill is a bill that has an enormous number of important policies for the people of this district. This district was highly reliant on the tax reductions from 2017. And again, I want to be clear. Those were not, unlike what some people tried to claim, that they were tax cuts for the wealthy. These were a lot of tax reductions for working class families. Whether you're talking child tax credits, whether you're talking standard deduction, whether you're talking lower rates, whether you're talking lower business rates, all of those things were things that were important for hardworking Central Texans. Our district, Texas 21, was on the higher side of the beneficiaries of the tax policies that we renewed, extended, and made better. We added to the tax policies. There was significant tax relief for seniors. It wasn't that we got zero taxes on Social Security, but we got significant reductions on Social Security taxes for those people getting Social Security and how their money is taxed. That was critically important. But we were also able to get spending reductions. We were able to get serious reforms, for example, to Medicaid. Now, people say, oh, you're taking Medicaid away. No, Medicaid is now higher than it was before in terms of over the 10-year window. Medicaid spending will go up, but it is now much more constrained to ensure that only those people who need to get it, that is the people who are unable to work, as opposed to those who are healthy and young and able to work. They are now able to get Medicaid, but we're restricting it from the able-bodied. We're restricting it in terms of fraud. We're cleaning up the system, and we saved $1 trillion on Medicaid. Work requirements on food stamps, work requirements on welfare. Those things are all things that we believe make it better and more fiscally responsible. We also were able to undo about half, depending on how you calculate it, the damage done by the so-called Green New Deal. We call it Green New Scam subsidies that were going to all of these wind, solar, battery, and other entities dotted throughout the whole country and all over Texas, undermining our grid, making it weaker, enriching big corporations, enriching China at the expense of our fellow Texans. We were able to get rid of about half of those subsidies, and we're still fighting to get more. I would have liked to have gotten rid of all of them. We had to end up compromising. I would have liked to have had more reforms for Medicaid and for welfare and food stamps. Well, we compromised, but we got a good position. We saved $1.7 trillion, and we saved about $400 or $500 billion on those subsidies. We got serious tax reductions for working class families, and we were able to deliver on a whole lot of policies that mattered for Central Texas. We got that done through our hard work to negotiate and get it done, including some things that aren't even out yet, and you will be learning about those in the coming months. Importantly, as the chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitution and limited government, we've held multiple hearings in the last several months on key issues like activist judges that have been getting in the way of the American people and my fellow Texans, like the child gender reassignment surgeries that were harming kids and that we saw unfold in Texas at Dell Children's and other places in Texas that needed to stop, and we had good witnesses demonstrating that, as well as so-called birthright citizenship, which is a magnet for illegal aliens. And we had good hearings on all of these issues to try to reinforce what the Trump administration has been doing to secure our border. And on that front, we've obviously made an enormous amount of progress. The Trump administration and this DHS and this Border Patrol and this ICE have reduced the border crossings to historic lows. For example, we had just 7,800 apprehensions at the southern border in July. This compared to 200,000 in the same month in 2021 and 2022 under Biden. And those reductions mean that our Border Patrol can then focus on fentanyl and focus on dangerous individuals and can focus on border crossings. And it means that ICE is no longer as overwhelmed while they go try to get out dangerous people like the individuals and the gangs, Tren de Aragua, that killed, for example, Jocelyn Ungare, a beautiful young girl from Houston, Texas. The daily crossings are down 93%. That's enormous. The fentanyl seizures has dropped significantly, but what that means isn't that we're not catching sufficient fentanyl. What it means is they're not driving as much traffic across our border. That's a big deal. Those two are the big issues, right? The big, beautiful bill, the spending and the taxes, and border and what we're doing. There's a lot of removals and a lot of self-deportations going on. That's a good thing. We need to have that in order to ensure that we get criminals out of our country and that we no longer have the overwhelming numbers of people that the Biden administration had let in. Now, let me close this part, and then I'll go to Q&A because I'd rather hear from you all. I could keep going about it. We've done so much. But let me close this on the flood. I can't possibly do justice to the impact on the families and the communities, particularly in Kerrville, Hunt, and the areas affected by the flood. I can't do it. The hardest thing I've ever had to do in Congress is sit with the families of those who had not been able to find their little girls from Camp Mystic, as well as other families, on the Saturday about 36 hours after the floods. By far the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But I've been so uplifted by the law enforcement community, the sheriff in Kerr, the city manager, the people of that community, the churches, everybody who came together, frankly, regardless of partisanship, the president, the Secretary of Homeland Security, everybody who got involved without territorial disputes, the governor's office, the head of the Texas Department of Emergency Management, Nim Kidd, all of the people in this community, state, local, and federal, came together to do this the right way. Nothing is perfect, but I got to tell you, this is a model for how you should do things in the face of adversity. We have now, in the private sector, through the Community Foundation of the Hill Country, raised over $120 million and counting. That does not count the concert from this last weekend in Austin. That does not yet count the concert coming up next week in Whitewater Amphitheater near New Braunfels. We believe that they're going to crack $130 or $40 million very soon, and maybe more. That money is already going out the door. That money is already getting to people and helping them through grants, through the Community Foundation. To be clear, they don't give any money to individuals. They give money to organizations to distribute to individuals, and they do so on a need basis. Importantly, you need to know that FEMA is processing claims. Now, the deadline for that is going to be, I believe, September 4th, in terms of making requests for FEMA applications for individual assistance for your homes. I think there's about 250 or so homes and both primary and secondary residences that have been impacted. If you're one of those, make sure you get your application in. If you're a small business, make sure you reach out and contact about what you need to do. We're going to keep putting information forward, keep trying to help people. The state legislature is meeting this week. They're about to pass their legislation to provide support for the communities. We're in constant communication with the state and the locals in order to deliver for the good folks in Kerrville. Obviously, Kendall was also affected, Kirk County and Kendall. So we'll continue to pray. Thanks for all of that great Texas spirit and pride that has been a model for everybody around the world. And the last thing I'll say, and again, I could go through a bunch of bills and other stuff. Happy to answer your questions. These are the front and center issues. When we get back in September, we're going to have to deal with the regular appropriations bills. We're going to be dealing with the spending. The government funding expires on September 30th. I'm almost certainly going to have to support a continuing resolution for the following reason. We will not get to agreement with Senate Democrats on funding levels that we believe are low enough. That's the summary. We're going to work with the Trump administration to try to hold spending in check. The Trump administration has been engaging in rescissions and in what we call impoundment, in ways to hold down spending and cutting waste and abuse, carry out what was going on with DOGE. The Trump administration is working with us on how to deliver a part of our agreement on the big, beautiful bill, the reconciliation tax and spend package. We were able to get agreements on holding the overall spending in check. We have money set aside for defense modernization while we try to root out all of the woke nonsense that's destroying our military at that time. So that's the update. That's where we are. Expect that to happen over the 3 weeks in September. I believe we'll end up at a CR. I'm actually okay with that, so long as spending stays flat and we can then go do what we need to do working with the Trump administration. With that, I've got dozens of other things I could talk about, bills, legislation. We introduced, I will say this, we introduced a bill today that has dozens of co-sponsors and growing that would restrict federal dollars from flowing to sanctuary cities and jurisdictions and counties and so forth if they don't work with ICE to do the federal job of ensuring that we're removing illegal aliens. We've got state and local jurisdictions that are interfering, and they shouldn't do that. At the same token that I was trying to hold the federal government responsible for doing their job to secure the border, locals shouldn't interfere with a federal government that does want to do its job. And so I've got legislation that would withhold federal funds in a complete way for jurisdictions that stand in the way of that progress. That bill was filed today. We'll be adding co-sponsors. We've also got another piece of legislation that we'll be advancing on a bipartisan basis this fall that would ban stock trading. I have a bill that I've had since 2020. Let me be clear. Ban stock trading for members of Congress. And I've had a bill since 2020 that would do that. And now we're working to build a bipartisan consensus to try to move that through this fall. So with that, I would like to turn the phone call over to take Q&A and look forward to hearing from your questions.
That's awesome. Let's go to Mr. Patrick about property taxes.
Hello. Yes, I'm curious about what's going to be done about property taxes. I mean, there's many individuals who have purchased their homes over 30 years and they're retiring, and we're still paying rent. And that's how I see it. We never own anything. So I was just curious, is there any way that we're going to get to a point where we'll eliminate the property taxes and let individuals own their property and their homes?
Well, that's a fantastic question. You know, it is, I think, fairly obvious to you and to listeners that that's a state and local issue, not federal. But I have a voice on tax policy, and I've used that voice and believe very much that our state leadership needs to make it a front and center objective to get rid of the property tax. I mean, at a bare minimum, you got to reduce it so significantly that it's no longer the rent that you rightly describe it as, that one has to pay on their own property that they've had for years and years. I think it is a broken model. I think we need to reform it. I agree with you completely. You know, we've given some relief over the last, I say we, the state government, the state leadership has given some relief over the last 2 sessions. But that relief is basically, in my observation, barely keeping up with the stress. In other words, the overall increases in values, the overall impact on the economy that's reducing how far a dollar will go. So we need to do a lot more. We need to do a lot better. And you know what that also includes? Constraining the size and scope of the state government, which has gotten too big, not unlike Washington. And I know we've got a lot of revenue, but we ought to be using that revenue to more radically reduce taxes for the people of Texas who are overburdened, unable often to even afford a house, particularly if you're a young Texan. We need rates to be lower. The president's working on that. We need revenue and income to be up for people, and we're working on that from an economy perspective. But we also need taxes, the tax burden, the insurance burden to go down. We need reforms on that whole space, healthcare costs, insurance costs, and housing. And I know you're focusing predominantly on property taxes. We need to eliminate them in the coming years. That's my view. That's what I would support in the state. But at the federal level, I will tell you that we were taking significant steps to try to prevent our brothers and sisters from New York in particular from trying to advance what we call SALT, the state and local tax deduction, because it encourages states to have high taxes. And we shouldn't be subsidizing that. And by the way, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's true for Texas, too, that we don't want to subsidize states into being high tax jurisdictions, because if the federal government is giving massive deductions for that, that helps states get away with high tax rates. I don't think that's a good thing. So we've been fighting that as much as we can. Thanks for the great question.
Awesome. Let's go to Mr. Scott Baker, and he has questions about windmills in Texas Hill Country.
Chip, I am curious about what the feds can do to limit windmills. I think they should be outlawed. And one of the ideas that I have is if you're going to put these monstrosities on your property, when the blades come down, they have to stay on your property. And then my other kind of question, I'm sneaking in here, sorry, is on a federal level, helping go after employers of illegals, the E-Verify stuff, is that anything that the Republicans can do to ratchet that up? Because I think on the pace that we're heading, we're never going to get 20, 30, 40 million people out of here. I think the system has to be hostile to these folks so that there's more self-deportation. So thank you.
Well, I think that's a very good question, fair question. There's 2 different topics. Let me address the first one, windmills. I love your idea, by the way. If you're going to be the one that's putting these windmills up and then you're going to take them down, someone's got to dispose of that stuff, because I can promise you right now they're having difficulty figuring out how to dispose of it. They're stacking up, unable to put them in landfills. And one of the things we did to address this issue, and look, this was front and center as the big, beautiful bill was being negotiated. You remember, I serve on the Budget Committee. In May, they were trying to move that bill through the Budget Committee. I objected. So did 3 of my colleagues, Ralph Norman, Josh Burkeen, and Andrew Clyde. We objected because they did not have enough reductions in the subsidies that are subsidizing wind and solar. We thought we needed that both because we needed more savings and because it's bad policy to subsidize this unreliable energy that destroys the grid, makes our landscape less pretty, and frankly undermines a lot of people's property values. So we fought it. We killed the bill for about 48 hours. It did not set well with certain people in D.C., including some of our own friends. But we thought it was the right thing to do. Lo and behold, we got far better policies in restricting those subsidies. So don't all listen to the news or the chattering heads who go out there and say, Chip Roy is trying to kill the big, beautiful bill. No. Chip Roy was trying to make the big, beautiful bill even more beautiful by stopping establishment Republicans who want to parade behind the president and use the president as cover to do stupid Washington establishment things like advance continued subsidies for unreliable energy. I'm not going to do that. We fought it, and we got pretty good wins. I wish we would have gone a little further, but sometimes you got to land the plane and figure out how to get it done. We did that, but we're going to stop a lot of these subsidies. We're still working on it. We worked in the final negotiations to get clarity on what the president and his administration was going to do on their regulations through the IRS and the tax subsidies. They issued those regulations this past week. They're pretty good. They could be a little better, and we're going to work with them on that, but they're pretty good in laying out some of the things we think are necessary to restrict the flow of these subsidies. On your second point, agreed. In the H.R. 2 bill, which we passed 2 years ago in Congress, that bill was the direct product of the Texas border plan that I led the Texas delegation to put forward. That Texas border plan laid out the principles that served as the model for H.R. 2, which is the first bill in history that was passed by Republicans that has no amnesty and nothing to do with status, but has only to do with security. And in that bill, it included E-Verify. It included changes to all of the asylum laws. It included changes to all of the parole laws that were being violated by Biden, and myriad other changes that would dramatically reduce the ability for a future administration to abuse immigration laws and rules and border security to flood the country with people from all over the world. Now we need to do our part to remove people. E-Verify is a part of that. We can do most of that through our I-9 processes, but they're just not as efficient. A lot of states, Texas and others that have E-Verify in place, we're able to do what we need to do to try to secure it. We got to go further, and we need to make sure we're removing people who shouldn't be here. We're working on it. We're working with Tom Homan. We're working with the Secretary of Homeland Security and all of the great leadership in the Trump administration to try to deliver. Right now, Congress needs to step up and deliver H.R. 2, the new version in this Congress. But we haven't gotten there because we were focused on the big, beautiful bill. But hopefully we'll do it soon.
Sounds good. Let's go to Nora in San Antonio, Texas. She has a question about federal judges.
Thank you for taking my question. Congressman, I'm wondering, these federal district judges that we see every day are obstructing Trump's agenda. What is it that Congress can do to stop it? Can Congress abolish their courts?
So that is a great question. As obviously somebody who serves on the House Judiciary Committee, it's front and center. We've had hearings on activist judges. I alluded to that before in my position as the chairman of the subcommittee on Constitution. Part of this is stuff that we have to elevate. One of the reasons that you're eloquently speaking about the issue is the work we do, working with the press, to highlight and elevate these issues so people can understand just how bad these activist judges are. Now, let me pause for 1 second, though. I don't want us to lose sight of the extent to which the president has actually been winning most of these cases. Yes, some of these judges, these particularly bad judges, these leftist judges, are offering initial opinions or things that slow down some of the agenda. Yep, that's happening. But the process, going up through the appeals process, a lot of those judges have been getting slapped down. A lot of the circuit courts have been saying, yeah, no, you didn't get that right. Other district judges have been coming with other opinions. We've done a very good job of putting some good judges, particularly in the Fifth Circuit, in the Northern District of Texas in particular, where judges are issuing a lot of very good opinions. So I say that as a balance to understand that the president is winning a lot of these cases in the end, and a lot of judges are issuing good opinions. But where these activist judges are acting, yes, Congress can either restrict the jurisdiction of some of these courts or, for example, the D.C. Circuit, and I've talked about that. I offered an amendment to do just that in the big, beautiful bill. We were not able to get it through some of the procedures, but we've had serious efforts and discussions about doing that. We have had a significant amount of education that people are getting and how some of these judges can get this stuff wrong, and we're going to continue to push that forward. The final thing you can do, of course, is if you've got a judge that is politically acting from the bench, then that judge is, in fact, raising questions that are different for judges than for executive branch officials. Remember that the Constitution contemplates not just high crimes and misdemeanors, as they do for the president and executives, but they also have a line in there about good behavior. Now, you got to litigate out what that means a little bit, but what they're basically getting at is that judges can't just go rogue to make stuff up. That's not consistent with the Constitution in any direction. So we've got more to do on that. We've got different bills and measures to try to address it. Obviously, it gets very difficult when you don't have willing partners in the Senate to do what I believe is the Lord's work to reclaim freedom and common sense that both the president is doing and what House Republicans are trying to do. We will keep at it, and I appreciate that question.
Awesome. Let's go to Mrs. Lori Harvey in San Antonio, and her question about student loans.
Hi, this is Lori Harvey, and my question is a little bit different, and it comes from seeing online recently lots of little videos of students that are having their student loan brought back, and they are in almost suicidal fear. They are saying life is not worth living, and my loans are paid off, my kids' loans are paid off, but I have a lot of heart for these kids. And I think the Republican Party has a great opportunity to stand with them. I think it was wrong, very wrong, to charge them 6% interest when the going rate was way lower. Many of them that had their loans set off for a while are now saying, I paid every month so well. Now I look and it's only gone by $5,000 because of the high interest rate. It was wrong. And I think that we need to stand up with these kids and say, hey, that part was wrong. I think accounts need to be looked at. And in my opinion, I think I would support zeroing out their interest rate, looking at the payments they made in the past and applying it all to principal to give them some hope. They can't buy a house. They can't buy a car. They are saying, why do I even need to live?
Ma'am. Yeah, Lori,
Yes.
Well, look, I appreciate that. I appreciate that question. Let me address it in a couple of different ways. Number one, it's a great question. We have, I think, frankly, let our kids down for the better part of at least a generation or two, in which we have shoved lots of people into four-year institutions of higher education without a real plan and without a view towards what they could actually do with their job while racking up debt in the process, allegedly, cheap and free debt. But even at 2 and 3 or 4% with subsidized federal loans, it adds up. And then when you add private loans on top of it, yes, a lot of these kids have a burden for a degree that doesn't even help them often. They would have been better off often doing something like going to a vocational school or just working and just getting experience. I think a lot of people are waking up to that reality, and I think our policies are catching up to that reality, number one. Number two, I do think that those who took out loans, you do have to have a way, and I think I heard in your description a similar, view when you were talking about not necessarily eliminating the loans, but trying to reduce the rates or taking other steps. And I appreciate that thinking, because I do think if you took the loans out, you do have to make good on the loans, right? We all have a free will, and there has to be some part to that. My wife took out loans. She was a product of a single mom, and we're still paying those loans. That's been 20 years. We're still paying them off. Now, I think we need to figure out ways to make this work. But let's also remember that one of the things that I've done is say that some of these higher education institutions themselves need to be on the hook. So if you're at the University of Texas or A&M, I went to UT for law school, my wife went to A&M undergrad and UT for law school, any other school, then if you're going to be pushing kids into these programs and you're going to be encouraging them to get that degree and then rack up debt, then those schools should have to be on the hook for that. I mean, you can't walk through UT or A&M or any school around the country and not see loads of money flowing into new buildings and all the fancy stuff. When the bottom line is you want your kids to learn, you want them to be able to get a degree that will then pay for them out in the real world. So we need to put them on the hook. So I introduced the HERO Act, HR 1739, to do just that. But also, look, college costs have skyrocketed because of bloated bureaucracies and spending, driving up the prices. And then some of the loans we're talking about where we overinflated it, that's driving up the prices. Now, some of that's forward-looking. You're calling in with a heart, and I don't know your political bent, and I don't care. You're calling in with a heart towards these people, these that are no longer kids, but, maybe they're in their mid-20s or they're 30, and they're trying to figure out how to buy a home, have a job, pay their bills, and they're on the hook for $100,000 or whatever of student loans. I get it. It is not easy. It is a mistake to forgive them, to forgive the loans fully and take those loans away because other people have done their part, paid their loans, et cetera. But can we work in terms of deductibility, in terms of managing the loans, dealing with the rates, because we as a society kind of dropped the ball and pushed all these kids into it? Sure, we can have those conversations, but the most important thing is for us to fix it going forward, put more kids in vocational schools, get things like the HERO Act to put more schools on the hook, because UT won't just shove a kid into a random degree that's not going to get them a job if they're then going to be on the hook for the loans. So we need more of that, more accountability, and we'll be working on it. I deeply appreciate it. I think this is one of the problems with the Department of Education and the federalization of all this in the first place. Look, we put a man on the moon in 1969. The Department of Education didn't get created until 1979. I think we were doing okay, and I think we should get back to that. I think we should restrict and reduce the Department of Education. I think we should get the feds out of it a lot and allow markets to drive some of it, because markets aren't going to subsidize loans that don't have value. That's part of the problem. So I hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Sounds good. And another thing, too, press star 3 if you would like to ask a question, and then star 6 to sign up for our e-newsletter. Let's go to Bethany in Fredericksburg about military going into cities to clean up law.
Hello, yes. My question was, do you support the federal government in sending the military into U.S. cities for policing?
So thanks for the question. And obviously that's being driven in a significant way by the recent news of the president and what they're doing in Washington, D.C. I'll answer that question, but let me take one step back. I have to go to Washington, D.C. Every week for my job because I represent you all there. My staff mostly has to live up there. Some live in the district, obviously, but my staff who lives in D.C., they have to live there. We've had staffers get killed, literally. We had a staffer who was murdered a couple of months ago. We've had staffers who were stabbed, staffers who were beaten up. We've had carjackings. We've had members of Congress get their cars jacked. I could go down the list of the criminal problems in Washington, D.C., but it is hard for me to put in perspective exactly how bad it is. And I say that as someone who lived in D.C. as a staffer before I ran for Congress, and frankly, it used to be safer. And we're now facing a nation's capital that is not safe or as safe as it should be. Let me be clear. Not as safe as it should be. So I think the president is 100% right to do what is needed to be done to try to clean that up. Now, what did the president do? The president took 2 significant steps and is doing others. One, he federalized the police department. What did that mean? It means that he, under the law, under the Home Rule Act that gave Washington, D.C. some autonomy, given that the Constitution gives the power over D.C. to Congress, in that act, the president has authority. If there's emergency situations and there's a set of conditions, I don't have them in front of me, in which the president can act. And he can say, all right, the D.C. police are now reporting up to the federal government and the president. Now, if that were Texas, I would have some problems with that because we're a state and we have individual autonomy and sovereignty as a state under our Constitution. Washington, D.C. does not. So I'm applauding the president for federalizing and taking the police so that we can step up enforcement in Washington, D.C. Second point, now answering your question. The National Guard was, in fact, deployed in D.C., and the president has the authority to do that. Again, different powers because we're not talking about a state. The president was using the National Guard to supplement what the law enforcement is doing. Now, I've not gotten a full briefing on everything they're doing, but understanding that the president has lawyers and people that work for him, and looking at the administration and looking at my observation and following the news, it appears to me that much like we dealt with this at the border with the National Guard, that they're supplementing the movement of people, supplementing the processing, supplementing the sort of security and observation, but not doing the arresting, not doing the policing. Now, happy to look at a story if someone wants to tell me otherwise, but I believe that that is the case. The reason I believe that is the case is because I believe that is what mirrors the law. So I believe that as long as the president is acting within the confines of the law, and I believe that he is, that using military to supplement law enforcement in the context of moving people around, securing barriers, moving traffic flow, helping provide that stability and security, while the police do their job of the arresting, enforcement, taking before judges and so forth, I think that's perfectly appropriate. I'm always happy to study on case-by-case basis if anything gets out of whack. And that's my job in Congress, to do that through hearings. But I'm going to give the president the benefit of the doubt until I'm given or shown otherwise.
Awesome. Let's go to Mrs. Christina Brown, and she has a comment about the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Hi, Roy. Christina Olson Brown, New Braunfels. I want to thank you for having these town hall meetings. It's very informative, so pat yourself on the back. And I'm wondering, in the future, there was a lot of people in my county that were frustrated because you didn't agree with the Big Beautiful Bill. And if you could have a town hall meeting and give us your point of view so that we understand, you know, we voted for you and we understand what your concerns are. And I'm still a little confused as to what your concerns are, and so I'd like to hear personally what your thoughts were on the Big Beautiful Bill.
Well, I appreciate the question. I'm always happy to answer questions. You do the best we can, and I think these town halls provide the best way for us to reach the most people. That's why we try to do them this way. I have to spend a lot of time in Washington, and in fact, the week we passed the Big Beautiful Bill was July 4th week, when we were actually supposed to be in the district. And in fact, I was supposed to be at Kerrville on the 4th, but we were in D.C. right up through the 3rd voting, and I voted for the Big Beautiful Bill. Now, I voted for that bill with ongoing concerns, even when I voted for it, and on the back of the concerns I had before and were making public when it was getting worsened by the Senate and by other people in Washington. Now, overall, and I described it at the very beginning, the bill is a balance of tax policy and of policies that involve and affect overall spending. It was my view then, before the bill, it was my view when I voted for the bill, and it is my view now, that my job is to tug it as far as I can in the direction of fiscal sanity as possible in that godforsaken town where nobody there cares about spending. Neither you nor any human being that voted for me sent me to Washington to rack up more debt. I know this because everyone tells me how bad it is that we keep racking up debt. But then some people don't like it when you do basic math and you put it out for the world to see that if you have certain tax policy combined with certain spending policy, you're going to have a certain amount of debt added to our already existing $37 trillion of debt. My job was to say, no, you, people in Washington, are going to do what you said you were going to do, and we're going to reduce spending. That's what I said. And I said, you're not going to get your tax cuts if you don't give me commensurate spending cuts. I stick by that. I think it's the right position. And guess what? We won. Did we win enough? Not everything I wanted. That's why I still had some concerns with the bill. But any objective analysis of that bill still raises concerns that there's more debt at the outset and more savings in the back part of the 10-year budget window, that leads me to be concerned that we may not get those savings, thus adding more debt to your children and grandchildren and mine. That's not sufficient for me. But through the end of the negotiations, I got comfortable that the application of the policies and the totality of what we were doing in terms of economic growth generation was going to have a significant impact on being able to create revenue enough to make me believe that we were getting at least deficit neutrality. Now, there's no way to know. It's just, you stick your finger in the air a little bit and you have to do modeling and economic guessing. I spent a lot of time talking to Secretary Bessent. He's a smart man. Spent a lot of time talking to the OMB director, Russ Vogt. He's a dear friend of mine and a smart man. I argued with both of them. I had a lot of intense fellowship, as Speaker Johnson likes to call it, with my colleagues and with the president. I cannot apologize for any of that. And in fact, it is the greatest thing that we have in our system. And I'm proud of what we were able to do to deliver what was people never said we could deliver. We were told we would never touch Medicaid. We got $1 trillion. We were told we could maybe save $300 billion in spending. We got 1.6 or 7. We were told we'd be lucky to get any repeal of the Green New Scam subsidies. We got 400 to 500 billion of those tax subsidies going to big corporations in China repealed. I'm proud of those things. Wish I could have delivered more, but I'm 1/435th of 1/2 of 1/3 of that bloated government. So that's what I'll keep doing. That's what I'll keep fighting for. And I'll keep having great conversations. It was funny when the president came down, and God bless him, and God bless Secretary Noem for coming down and visiting with the great first responders and the families that were affected by the floods. When the president was there, we sat around a round table, and he was introducing all of us, and he was kind to say and introduce me. And he said, well, Chip Roy and I, we spent a lot of time together last week on that big, beautiful bill. And he paused, and he goes, and he's not easy, but he's good. And what he meant by that was, I don't make it easy. I make it, I think, the appropriate amount of difficult to be able to get through legislation without honoring what we said we would do to lower the spending, to decrease the size of government, and to deliver on the policies you all sent me to Washington to deliver on. And I'm proud of it. Again, if I were czar, I would have gone further. I would have tried to save more money, but I'm not. You got to work through the legislative process, and I'm proud of the way we did that.
Awesome. And another thing, *3 to ask a question and *6 to sign up for our e-newsletter. Let's go to Miss Kathy Hood in Harper, and she's wondering about Paragon Energy being close to a school in Harper, Texas.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking my call this evening. I'll be the first one to tell you I do not know very much about what's going on with Peregrine. They are within a very short walk of the school in Harper, which is on 290. 290 crosses right in front of the school, and then there's Peregrine. If they have a fire, I've been told the volunteer fire department could not put it out. That is an all-school building, kindergarten through high school. I don't have any children over there, but I still care, and I wish that more people because you ask somebody in the community if they know anything about them. No, not really. So I don't know how safe all those children are. There's a Baptist church right there.
So, yeah, ma'am, I very much appreciate this question. Actually, it's really important because this is something my staff has been very focused on alongside with me and what we've been trying to do. We first sent a letter to them on this issue, and we demanded clarification, asking if they have any kind of contingency plan, et cetera, and why they chose a drought-stricken area. Now, obviously, we've had a little bit of rain, but we're still technically under overall drought. And we sent a letter, and ultimately the company did not answer those questions directly or in a way that we think is appropriate, so we've asked for a meeting. We expect to have that meeting. They've agreed to have a meeting, so we will press them hard on those questions. And, whether or not they source materials from China and all those things. And look, we've got those concerns as well. And we're going to press them on whether they're following all the guidelines and all the rules. And by the way, I think this needs to be a state issue as well in the state legislature about what we're able to do to have a say and a voice in our local communities about what goes in there and what doesn't. frankly, because we're a very pro-energy state, and most of the people on this call are very happy with that in terms of our ability to get access to abundant natural gas and abundant petroleum products and to build the right facilities without subsidies to have abundant power. But the flip side is, we've got a little bit sometimes too much power. For example, when I first came into Congress, I was dealing with the pipeline that was going in under the Pedernales and under the Blanco Rivers for a future gas pipeline. And that was causing lots of concerns for my constituents and their water supply. Now, again, I'm pro-energy, I'm pro-natural gas, but I am not pro slapping these big pipelines in the hill country, disturbing the water supply under rivers, and disturbing this natural, beautiful part of the hill country. And so we pressed on that. And frankly, we had a pretty good impact on getting them to move the pipeline so that it would not go under the Blanco River. And I think that was a important thing to do. Similarly here, look, there are places that maybe it's appropriate to have a battery facility. Maybe it's appropriate to have wind or solar. But frankly, I think they're less reliable than natural gas or compact nuclear. I think there are a lot of things we can do that's better. And ultimately, we need to get to the bottom of what the safety is, what the impact is, whether it should or shouldn't be near schools. And you have my word that we'll continue to press on it. This was, last point, part of why we fought so hard in the big, beautiful bill to get so many of those subsidies pulled back. And I will not remotely second guess my position and need to do that in Congress to say that bill needed to deliver on reducing the subsidies that the president campaigned on, and that people in Congress that didn't want to do that, we needed to beat them and win that issue, and we did.
Awesome. Let's go to the next question, but this is one online question, and then we'll give it to the congressman for final remarks. So the online question said, what is your opinion about the president banning mail-in ballots and the elimination of voting machines? Does this jeopardize us as it relates to free and fair elections?
So it is a great question. Obviously, we care a great deal about election integrity. One of the things I'm most proud of is the piece of legislation that I introduced called the SAVE Act, which is a bill that would, frankly, it shouldn't be that controversial. It would simply guarantee that only American citizens vote in American elections. We were able to pass it out of the House last year. Chuck Schumer's Democrat-led Senate killed the bill. We've been able to pass the bill this year out of the House, and we're still waiting to see if we can move it in the Senate. We think we ought to move it. We think it's important. We also have other pieces of legislation we're ready to introduce soon that will improve upon and expand upon the SAVE Act. And one of the issues that we want to address legislatively that the president is trying to do through his executive powers where appropriate is stop the abuse of mail-in ballots. They are abusive. They are problematic. We saw that on full display in 2020 during COVID because they are ripe for fraud and abuse. That was a bipartisan agreed consensus prior to COVID. It then became oddly and strangely partisan. It should not be. We should have as much as possible in-person voting with ballots that are secure and right in front of us with quick tabulation as close to Election Day as possible. You can have some room for absentee ballots, what we call the old school absentee ballots. If you're in the military or traveling, request the ballot. But this blanket mail-in ballots are ripe for fraud. The president is absolutely right to do that. As I alluded to before on the bipartisan basis, it was Jimmy Carter and former U.S. Secretary James Baker, hardly partisan, they're both Democrat and Republican and hardly not the most partisan individuals. They came together on a bipartisan basis to say, guys, mail-in ballots are problematic. So that SAVE Act, which is H.R. 22, is one of the most important pieces of legislation we have. I'm proud to lead it. I testified in the state legislature a few years back on a lot of the issues involving election integrity and the fraud and the rampant abuses that we saw even right here in Texas, and they need to be reformed. So I'm happy to continue to work on that issue, and we'll keep you all posted as we're able to move forward.
All right, sir, I'm going to give you some final remarks.
Yep, and with that, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody joining the call. I know we're at the end of the hour. However many people have stuck around, I appreciate you. We're able to reach thousands of people across the district this way. Appreciate your support, but more importantly, just appreciate your prayers for the people of Kerrville, the people of the Hill Country affected by the floods, and all the hard work and donations that you're doing. This is the most important issue affecting our community right now. We're on it. We're fighting to try to free up any of the regulatory hurdles to help people. If you guys have any issues, certainly make sure that by September 4th, if you need to apply for a FEMA grant, you do. Make sure you reach out to my office if you know of any concerns. Continue to listen for updates. Our newsletter that we put out on a weekly basis, we try to keep you up to date with what's going on legislatively, what issues there are. If you have any issues with passports or, your Social Security, we have the best customer service and the best constituent service team in the Congress. And we do our best on a completely nonpartisan basis to help any constituent that has any issue. So appreciate everybody. Thanks for joining this call. We'll continue to keep you up to date, and we'll try to do our best to get legislation done in September to keep spending in check and to do our job as you sent me to Washington to do. So God bless you all. Again, keep praying for the people of Kerrville, and God bless Texas.